Are there serious environmental dangers on the Belmont School construction site? And is this why the LAUSD is going to spend $110 million more to clean up the site? Stay tuned. We'll talk with a member of the District Attorney's ad hoc investigation on Belmont who was Special Legal Counsel to the LAUSD Inspector General. Next on Full Disclosure.
At every document that went into the development and construction of the Belmont Learning Center. That facility, as you recall, had almost $200 million of public taxpayers' money invested. It was destined to be a state-of-the-art inner-city high school for more than 4,000 kids who are currently attending very crowded schools or being bussed out to the valley. Unfortunately, that development never went through because of crimes that were committed at Belmont. The school district tried to use a very innovative technique for building a very ambitious project. This was a very big school. 4,500 kids, I think, were destined ultimately to go there. It was supposed to include retail. They were going to put a grocery store in there. It's a very big site. So did they bite off more than they could chew? Yes, clearly. Did they manage it well? No. And what we found was enormous waste, fraud, and abuse. It was a tragedy because they knew, they being the school district and the people developing the property, at all times about the environmental hazards.
Aren't they required to prepare an EIR which would identify those problems before they started?
Yes, and those environmental planning documents you refer to were prepared. I think the school district did an excellent job of working through the various statutes. They knew what they needed to do. It was built into the budget. It just wasn't done. The problem is that you have methane, a gas that comes out of that oil field, as well as hydrogen sulfide, a more dangerous gas. It's the one that smells like rotten eggs. You have to make sure that you take care of those gases by venting them, capturing them, and eliminating them from human exposure. That was not done at Belmont, and that is the central reason the school is not occupied today. The fundamental problem at Belmont was the developers, contractors, and subcontractors didn't do their job. They got paid. They didn't do what they were supposed to do. Los Angeles has developed a culture that I believe is extremely corrupt in the way it approaches large dollar decisions. I think Belmont Learning Center is a tragic paradigm of that process. What we had here were a lot of taxpayers and children who were ripped off in the development and construction of this high school, and not a single public prosecutor had the courage or gumption to step up and go after these big fat cats who had ripped off the taxpayers and the kids. I personally signed the letters from Mr. Mullinex referring specific individuals and companies that we believed the district attorney should prosecute. For reasons I've never understood, the district attorney declined to make that prosecution.
Did you actually name names?
We named names. We named specific individuals. We named company names. We were very clear. We laid out the evidence page by page, document by document. Anyone with a grade school education could have followed our approach. I think it was a political decision not to prosecute these folks who were a very big, powerful interest in our community.
Say that we've interviewed Steve Cooley, and we have a video clip of him which basically says he's saying that he wasn't given names, that the Inspector General and Mr. Patchett did not name names, and they didn't ask for indictment.
Those are simply false statements. I don't know why Mr. Cooley would want to misrepresent the record. The Inspector General's letters I signed, so I have personal knowledge of who we named. They were directed originally to Mr. Garcetti, but when Mr. Garcetti was defeated by Mr. Cooley, all of that information was made available. I was in the room. I saw the boxes. I saw what was available to the district attorney. I saw it on the tables in front of Mr. Cooley. All that information was there. Why he would make those statements, I don't understand.
I was told by several people that they were present at a meeting at which time a draft indictment was presented to the district attorney. And when I asked him about it, he said no, he never received a draft indictment. So who's right?
I think the individuals who served on the task force have told the truth. I think Mr. Patchett has told the truth. I think Mr. Mullinex has told the truth. I was not in the meeting where the presentation of the draft indictment was made, but I was told it existed. I never got a chance to see it. I was in a subsequent meeting where it was discussed. So, if If it looks like a rose and smells like a rose, I suspect it's a rose. What it means is that we have a prosecutor who can engage in a cover-up, and no one except the Attorney General can supervise him. Now, the Attorney General has the power under our Constitution to supervise the district attorney. I call on Mr. Lockyer to call on Mr. Cooley to disclose what the debate was in that office and why an indictment was not in fact sought before the grand jury. The developer said there was no methane gas on the southern part of the lot. They discovered, after making that representation to the fire department, that there was methane. Did they report it immediately? No. They waited months to report that until after they had built the buildings. Now, clearly that's evidence that any prosecutor would look at and say, hey, wait a minute. Furthermore, you can walk into Belmont today and find floors for which the school district paid good money for concrete that are still dirt. Now, you don't have to be a genius to figure out that if I bought a floor that was made out of concrete and it's still dirt, you got ripped off. Now, how Steve Cooley can call those things not crimes, I don't understand.
At one point, there was actually a confession from one of the contractors that they had fraudulently and submitted a fraudulent bill.
That's right.
You know that for a fact?
I was in the room. I heard the confession. Confession's a strong word. We were interviewing the various subcontractors, trying to understand how they developed their bills. And we were informed by one subcontractor, the gentleman who owned the business, that he had been told by the prime contractor to prepare his bill in a certain way, which would allow the prime contractor and the subcontractor to both get paid for that particular item.
What kind of a situation allowed this to happen?
Poor oversight by the school district and rapacious greed on the part of the developer and the contractors.
Do the taxpayers know when their money's being used? And I'm going to use an example of the certificates of participation, which is non-voter approved long-term public indebtedness. Isn't it true that Belmont was financed with certificates of participation, they call them COPs, and that the taxpayers didn't even know about it?
Yes, that's correct. There are financing techniques that are used by every entity, but in this particular case, they raised the money saying that it would be used at Belmont and using other properties as the collateral, not Belmont itself, but other school properties. It was clear that there wasn't full disclosure. I think the Internal Revenue Service initially believed that there wasn't complete disclosure. For reasons I don't understand, the IRS didn't even pursue it. There's a point at which every government agency failed to protect either the taxpayers or the children.
Well, I've seen two letters from the IRS that says that the bondholders who bought the certificates of participation, that the interest, the considerable amount of interest on $91 million,
right,
was not exempt from tax because of the way the project was not adhering to the law.
Yes, that's true. I've seen those letters. And what's interesting is the same law firm that wrote the letter saying it would be tax exempt was also the school district's lawyer in building Belmont. Everybody was tied in to make sure it would work. There were not checks and balances. The biggest problem we have now, though, is that the prosecutors have let the statutes of limitation run. You can only prosecute someone for a certain number of years after they commit the crime, and then the law says it's too stale, we're not going to let you go forward. That, frankly, is the biggest failure of our prosecutors. They have allowed this case to languish, and now it's probably impossible to prosecute people under many of these laws. Every law firm, every accounting firm has licensed individuals. They're sworn to uphold the law, and they're sworn to an ethical code. All of those codes were breached here. And I think the central issue is the same issue it always is, money. If there's enough money, people will bend the rules to make more money. I think what happened here is you had a very weak customer. You had professionals who knew the customer was weak. They realized they could get more money for doing not a complete job. Complete job's hard work. You've got to make sure you do your paper right, dot your I's, cross your T's. Good lawyers work very hard, and they're very fastidious about making sure everything is done according to the code and the regulations. That didn't happen here. We had slipshod legal work. We had very poor accounting standards. We had 3 people reviewing bills, and they approved a bill for concrete for a floor when there's dirt there today. Now, how is that possible? You have to accept that the school district got ripped off by the professionals that it hired. Shame on the school district for being ripped off, but shame on the professionals for taking advantage of the school district. It is a tragedy. We have an $8 billion plus budget for the LAUSD school district. We have kids who can't read in the 3rd grade. Now, clearly we're not spending that money as efficiently as we should be. We're doing a better job, I think, than we used to. But no one's accused the LAUSD of being an excellent school system. We need to build that high school. We need to open it so those kids can have a brighter future. We need people with courage and ability to move forward on this. I hope they do their job.
Uncovering waste, exposing fraud, revealing corruption. FullDisclosure.net, the news behind the news.